The sky burned red above the crystal city. Screams echoed across the palace walls as fire rained down from the invading fleet. Princess stood on the balcony, her long silver hair whipping in the violent wind. Her hands shook not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of duty. She had ruled this world since she was a child, yet never had she faced an enemy like this, an unstoppable force bent on conquest. "Enough," she shouted, her voice breaking through the chaos. "I will not run, I will not hide, my people will not be slaves." A shadow moved in the distance, a massive warship descending, glowing like a burning star. The enemy's leader, a creature tall and jagged with eyes that burned like molten metal, appeared on the balcony opposite hers. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence alone carried the threat of death. His chest tightened. She had trained for this moment her whole life, learning diplomacy, strategy, and combat. But now all her lessons felt useless. The enemy's ships advanced like a wave of black lightning, tearing through the city's defenses with terrifying precision. Her personal guard, a team of elite warriors, had fallen one by one. Their screams haunted her, each one a dagger to her heart. And now she was alone. Alone with her fear, her anger, and the impossible choice looming ahead. She clenched her fists. "I surrender," she whispered, the words bitter and heavy. Her surrender was not for herself, but for her people. If she gave herself to the enemy, perhaps they would spare the city. Perhaps they would not kill everyone she loved. But then a sudden sound cut through the chaos, a sharp human voice. "Princess, don't do it." She turned. At the foot of the palace steps, a young human student stood. His brown hair was messy, his uniform torn, and his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. He held a strange device in his hands, glowing faintly with an unearthly light. Who are you?" demanded, her voice trembling with surprise and hope. I'm just a student," he said, panting. "But I know you don't have to give up. You're not alone. You don't have to surrender to them." His heart ached at his words. She had never met a human before, and yet here he was, standing in the middle of destruction, daring to fight when all hope seemed lost. The alien leader's eyes narrowed. He advanced, raising a weapon that glimmered with deadly energy. The human didn't flinch. Instead, he pressed a button on his device, sending a pulse of light that knocked the nearest enemy soldiers off their feet. His breath caught. The human, this fragile, ordinary human, had done what her entire army could not. "Come with me," he shouted, extending his hand. "We can fight them together." For a moment, hesitated. Everything inside her screamed that she should trust no one, not even this human. But the sight of him, fearless and determined, ignited a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. She nodded slowly. I'll try." Together, they ran down the palace steps. Fire and smoke swirled around them, the cries of her people urging her forward. The enemy closed in, but the human student never looked back. He moved with purpose, guiding her toward a hidden escape route beneath the city, one she had forgotten even existed. As they ran, realized something she hadn't known before. Courage wasn't just about standing alone. It was about choosing to fight, even when the odds were impossible, and trusting that someone, anyone, could stand with you. The streets trembled under the bombardment, buildings collapsed, the enemy pressed closer, and yet for the first time since the attack began felt a strange warmth in her chest. She was not surrendering, not yet. Glanced at the human beside her. His name, he had whispered it once, was strange, ordinary name for a strange, extraordinary person, and yet he had appeared at the exact moment she thought all was lost. She said, her voice barely above a whisper, How can you be so brave?" He smiled, though fear danced in his eyes. "Because someone has to be, someone has to believe we can win, and right now that someone is us." The city was burning, the enemy closing in, and hope seemed fragile as glass. Yet in that moment, Princess understood one truth. Sometimes salvation comes not from armies or weapons, but from a single human heart willing to fight alongside you. And for the first time in her life, she dared to hope. Smoke choked the streets as Princess and ran, their footsteps echoing against cracked stone. The crystal city, once radiant with silver towers and shimmering lights, now burned like a fallen star. Sparks rained from the sky, and the roar of the enemy fleet was deafening. Every second they stayed out in the open was a second closer to death. Led her down narrow alleys, twisting and turning as if the city itself had become a labyrinth. "This way," he shouted, pulling open a hidden hatch at the side of an abandoned building. Dust and debris swirled around them as they slipped inside. The passage was dark, wet, and narrow. His heart pounded not just from fear, but from relief. For the first time, she felt a small measure of safety. How do you know this place?" she asked, her voice trembling. Shook his head. I don't know. I found it in old maps at the Human Archives. I studied your planet before coming here. I knew I had to find a way to help." Blinked, humans were strange creatures, impulsive, messy, and seemingly fragile. And yet, this one had come prepared. She had expected warriors, generals, or diplomats, but not a student. A simple human who carried courage like a weapon sharper than any sword. The passage led them beneath the city, twisting through tunnels filled with strange, glowing crystals. The light reflected in silver eyes, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. "We have to move quickly," said, glancing back. "The enemy knows the city is compromised. They'll find us soon." Suddenly the ground shook. A deep rumble echoed through the tunnels. Dust fell from the ceiling and the walls cracked. Stumbled but grabbed her hand, steadying her. "They're above us," he whispered, his voice tense. "They're looking for anything that moves." Panic rose in his chest. She had ruled with confidence, with power, but down here in the cold darkness, all she felt was fear. And yet, standing beside, she felt something else, a strange, fragile hope. They reached a wider cavern, glowing with pale crystal light. Stopped. "This is it. This tunnel leads outside the city to the northern cliffs. If we can reach the cliffs, we might get to the rebels hiding in the mountains. They've been resisting the invasion for years." Nodded. "Then we must not fail." Her voice was soft but firm. As they moved forward, the enemy found them. A piercing alarm rang through the tunnels. A group of alien soldiers appeared, their weapons glowing red, eyes scanning every shadow. Didn't hesitate. He activated the device he carried. A pulse of bright light exploded, sending the soldiers staggering backward, their armor sizzling from the energy. His heart leapt. How are you doing this?" Smiled grimly. "Improvising. Humans are good at improvising." They ran, darting through the tunnels, leaping over fallen rocks and broken crystal. Noticed how calm he was, even when their lives were in danger. Each move was calculated, each step filled with courage. And each time she looked at him, she felt a pull she could not explain, something deeper than admiration. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time seemed to blur. Finally, they reached a narrow exit at the edge of the cliffs. The wind whipped their hair, and the roar of the ocean below reminded that the world was bigger than the city, bigger than the invasion, bigger than the fear that had paralyzed her. But as they climbed to the edge, the alien fleet's spotlights swept across the cliffs. Soldiers appeared, scrambling to reach them. Froze for a moment, her legs heavy with exhaustion and despair. "It's over," she whispered. "No," said, grabbing her hand. "It's not over, not yet, not while we're alive, not while we have each other." Something inside her shifted. She realized that surrender was not a law of the universe. It was a choice, and she didn't have to make it, not if she fought, not if she believed. Together, they made a desperate leap from the cliff into the dense mist below. Rocks scraped their hands, and the cold wind cut through their clothes, but they landed safely in the shadow of the northern forest. Gasped for breath, her body shook from adrenaline, fear, and relief. She looked at whose eyes were wild but bright, filled with determination. "You saved me," she whispered. He shook his head. "We saved each other." And in that moment, Princess understood something she could never have imagined before. Strength did not always come from armies or weapons. Sometimes it came from trust, from courage, and from a single human heart willing to stand beside you, even in the darkest hour. The enemy fleet continued to burn the city behind them, unaware that the princess they thought defeated was still alive, and that a human student had changed the course of her fate. For the first time in her life, felt hope. Not the fragile hope of desperation, but the kind that could burn brighter than any star. And she would hold on to it no matter the cost. The forest stretched endlessly, dark and silent except for the distant roar of the ocean. Princess and moved cautiously through the undergrowth, their bodies aching from the cliff jump and their hearts pounding with exhaustion. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle a threat. Yet, despite the danger, felt a strange peace. She was alive, and for the first time in days, she wasn't alone. Ahead, a faint glow appeared between the trees, held up a hand. The rebels' camp is close. They'll shelter us at least for a little while. His eyes widened. Rebels? You mean people still resisting the invaders? He nodded. Yes, they've been fighting for years. Small groups scattered. They never surrender. They keep hope alive. Felt a lump in her throat. Her city had fallen, her guards had died, and she had been ready to give up. And yet here were humans who refused to yield, who fought with nothing but courage and determination. Something stirred inside her, a mixture of awe and resolve. They emerged from the trees into a clearing. The camp was simple, tents, fires, and a few makeshift barricades. Rebels looked up, their eyes wary, weapons raised. One of them, a tall woman with short, dark hair and a scar across her cheek, stepped forward. "Who are you?" the woman demanded. "I'm Princess," said, holding her head high despite the dirt and grime. "And he's a human from another world." The rebels froze. Whispers ran through the camp, a princess from the Crystal City and a human from another planet. The woman narrowed her eyes. "If you're truly her, then you must have seen the worst, but why trust a human?" Stepped forward, because sometimes trust is the only weapon we have left. The rebel leader studied him for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. "You may stay, but one wrong move and you're on your own." Exhaled, relief washed over her. For the first time, she could rest, plan, and think. But her mind was far from calm. The enemy fleet still burned her city. Every moment of delay could mean the death of thousands. That night around the fire and spoke quietly. "How do you fight them?" she asked. Shook his head. "We can't match them ship for ship, weapon for weapon, but we can outsmart them. Ambushes, traps, sabotage, every small victory counts. You've seen their arrogance. They think they're invincible. They're not. We just need to show them they're not." Nodded slowly. She had always believed power meant strength, armies, and technology. But now she realized that courage, cleverness, and hope could be just as powerful. Over the next days, the rebels trained in guerrilla tactics, showing her hidden routes, secret signals, and ways to strike quickly and vanish. Was always by her side, teaching, encouraging, and protecting. Watched him, amazed at his fearlessness and ingenuity. A human with no combat training had become her anchor, her guide, and somehow her inspiration. One evening, as the camp settled and stood on a ridge overlooking the distant city, smoke still rose from the Crystal City, a grim reminder of all that had been lost. "We have to do something," said softly. "If I stay hidden, if I wait, everything will be gone." Nodded. "Then we fight, but we don't fight alone. We have the rebels and we have each other. That's more than most people ever get." His heart swelled with emotion. She had spent her life feeling trapped by duty, by fear, by expectation. But now, for the first time, she felt free, not because danger was gone, but because someone believed in her, because someone dared to fight alongside her. Suddenly, alarms blared from the edge of the camp. Scouts reported movement. Enemy patrols had discovered a portion of the forest. The rebels scrambled, weapons in hand, faces hard with resolve. Stomach twisted with fear. She could run, hide, surrender, but she refused. She would stand. She would fight. And she would fight with a human beside her, a human who had already changed everything. Took her hand. "We start tonight," he whispered. "We hit them before they hit us. We show them humans and aliens like you are not so easily broken." Nodded, determination blazing in her eyes. "Then let's show them." And for the first time, she didn't feel like a princess hiding in fear. She felt like a leader, a warrior, and part of something bigger than herself. The path ahead was dangerous, terrifying, and uncertain, but with the rebels, she knew she could face it. The first glimmers of dawn painted the sky. The city still smoldered in the distance, but hope had returned. And with it, a spark that no enemy could extinguish. Night had fallen over the northern forest, thick and quiet, except for the occasional crack of branches underfoot. Princess and crouched behind a ridge, overlooking the enemy outpost at the edge of the Crystal City. Fires flickered in the distance, and shadows of alien soldiers moved like dark ghosts among the ruins. "This is it," whispered, checking the small device strapped to his wrist. "We hit them now before they realize we're alive. Timing is everything." Stomach churned with fear, but her hands were steady. For the first time in days, she didn't feel helpless. She had trained with the rebels, studied their tactics, and most importantly, she had. His calm determination grounded her, gave her courage she didn't know she had. The plan was simple yet dangerous. The rebels would strike in small groups, sabotaging energy generators, cutting communications, and luring soldiers into traps, and would lead one of the teams, striking the outer perimeter and creating a diversion for the others. "Remember," said, looking her in the eye, "we're not just fighting to survive. We're showing them that humans and allies cannot be defeated easily. They'll underestimate us. That's our advantage." Nodded, she took a deep breath, letting the cold night air fill her lungs. Then, with a silent signal, they moved. The first ambush went smoothly. Its device emitted a soft pulse, disabling surveillance drones, led the rebels into the shadows, using the ruined buildings as cover. They struck quickly, knocking out guards, setting small charges to disable power nodes, and retreating before the enemy could react. The alien soldiers, confident in their superior numbers, were slow to adapt. They didn't expect a human student and an alien princess to lead such a precise, calculated attack. Each move made, each decision she gave, was flawless under pressure. The rebels watched in awe, realizing that the princess they thought broken was a warrior born to inspire. But then chaos erupted. A patrol returned earlier than expected, cutting off their escape. Froze for a heartbeat, panic flaring in her chest. She had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. Grabbed her arm. "Focus," he said, voice low but urgent. "We can do this together." He darted forward, tossing a small, glowing orb that exploded in a flash of light, temporarily blinding the soldiers. Followed, moving like water through the shadows, her heart pounding, her every sense alert. They reached a crumbling wall that led to the rebels' fallback point. Behind them, the enemy regrouped, weapons blazing, but its device continued to disrupt their movements, giving the team precious seconds to escape. When they reached the fallback point, collapsed onto the ground, gasping. Sweat and ash covered her face, yet there was exhilaration in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered, disbelief and pride mingling in her voice. Smiled, crouching beside her. "No, you did it. You led them. You made the impossible happen." His chest tightened. She had always believed her duty was a burden, a cage. But now she realized something profound. Leadership wasn't about ruling from a throne. It was about inspiring courage, taking risks, and trusting those who stood with you, even when hope seemed impossible. The rebels cheered quietly in the shadows. For the first time in months, they had struck a meaningful blow against the invaders. Small, yes, but significant. A symbol that resistance was alive, that the enemy's arrogance could be challenged. Put a hand on her shoulder. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We're going to hit them harder, smarter, and next time we won't be alone." Nodded, her eyes drifted toward the distant city, glowing ominously under the enemy fleet. Her people were still in danger, her home still burning. But now she felt something she hadn't in a long time, determination. Not despair, not fear. "I will not surrender," she whispered. "Not again, not ever, not while there's even one person willing to fight with me." His hand squeezed hers. "And I'll fight with you always." Looked at him, really looked, and for a fleeting moment she saw not just a human student but a companion, a partner, a spark of hope in the darkness. The night was cold, the enemy fierce, but something inside her had shifted. They had taken the first step. The enemy had been wounded, the rebels had hope, and Princess, she had found her courage again. The forest was silent once more, but the quiet was different now. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of anticipation, the calm before a storm that they would face together. Looked at the horizon, the distant fires of the Crystal City burning still, and she whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." The dawn was cruel. Smoke from the Crystal City lingered in the sky, mingling with clouds of ash and the acrid scent of burning metal. Princess stood at the edge of the rebel camp, staring toward the distant ruins of her home. Her heart ached. Her city, her people, still suffered, even as she had struck a blow against the invaders. Approached quietly, his eyes scanning the horizon. "They know we're alive," he said grimly. "They're coming for us." Swallowed hard, she had hoped their first strike would give them a small advantage, a moment of reprieve. Instead, the enemy's retaliation had begun. Scouts had reported troop movements, faster, larger, more coordinated. The invaders were not forgiving. They were precise, relentless, and terrifyingly efficient. The rebel leader, the woman from before, gathered everyone. "We've fought them before," she said, her voice sharp with determination. "We've lost, we've won, but we survive because we adapt. Tonight we fight differently. Tonight we make them pay for every step they take on our land." Nodded, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders. She was no longer a princess waiting for rescue. She was a leader of fighters, human and alien alike, standing against an unstoppable force. Night fell again, and the forest grew dark and tense. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made hearts race, and led a small team ahead, moving silently to intercept the approaching enemy forces. Its device hummed softly, ready to disrupt their communications and give them an edge. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. The enemy had arrived in full force, dropping from the sky in sleek black ships that glinted like obsidian knives. Soldiers poured out, weapons glowing with deadly energy. The rebels opened fire, arrows and makeshift explosives raining down. His pulse raced. Her hands gripped her weapon tightly. Fear roared in her chest, but she forced it down. "Hold the line," she shouted. "Don't let them break us." The battle erupted in chaos. Sparks flew as energy beams met shields. Explosions tore through the forest. Fought with every ounce of strength, her training and instinct guiding her. She moved like a shadow, striking, dodging, leading, inspiring. Was beside her, fearless and ingenious. He directed small teams, set traps, and used his device to disable enemy armor. Each time an enemy approached, he found a way to turn the odds in their favor. He was not a warrior by training, but courage and quick thinking made him one. Amid the clash, a blast knocked off her feet. Pain shot through her arm. She gasped, stunned, as a soldier advanced. Lunged forward, slamming the soldier with a pulse from his device, sending him crashing backward. "Are you okay?" asked, concern flashing in his eyes. Nodded, forcing herself to her feet. "Thanks to you," she whispered, but there was no time for more words. The enemy pressed on, relentless. Hours felt like minutes as the battle raged. Realized something vital: strength alone would not win this war. Strategy, unity, and the courage to fight against impossible odds, that was their true weapon. Humans and aliens, side by side, had become more than the sum of their parts. Then the enemy commander appeared, the same towering figure from the Crystal City. His eyes locked onto, and the forest seemed to still. He raised his weapon, energy crackling with lethal intent. Felt fear like a cold wave wash over her, but she did not flee. She stood her ground, her eyes meeting. He nodded, a silent promise. "I've got you." Together they charged. The rebels followed, a wave of defiance against an overwhelming force. Sparks flew, energy clashed, and the air was thick with smoke and screams. And through it all felt something new: connection, trust, and an unshakable resolve. By dawn, the battlefield was trees burned and the forest littered with debris. Yet the enemy had not broken them. The rebels had survived, and had discovered a truth she could never unlearn: courage was contagious, and hope could ignite even in the darkest hour. Leaned against a tree, exhausted but smiling faintly. "We did it," he said, voice hoarse. Shook her head. "We're still alive," she corrected. "And that's enough for now. Tomorrow we fight again." For the first time in her life, she felt not just the weight of responsibility, but the strength of partnership. The enemy was powerful, terrifying, and relentless, but they had each other, and that made all the difference. And somewhere deep inside, realized something she had never admitted. She had begun to rely on more than just his courage. She had begun to trust him completely. The flames of retaliation had tested them. The night had been merciless, but Princess and had survived, and in surviving they had found something the enemy could never destroy: hope. The forest was quiet, almost eerily so, as Princess and prepared for the next strike. Dawn had barely touched the horizon, and the air was thick with smoke from the previous night's battle. Every rebel was on edge, every shadow a possible threat. The enemy fleet still loomed in the distance, and the Crystal City burned, a grim reminder of what they were fighting for. "This is it," whispered, adjusting his device. "If we do this right, we can cripple their supply lines, force them to retreat, buy your people time." His heart thumped violently. The stakes were higher than ever. One mistake could mean death, not just for them, but for the rebels and for the city they hoped to save. Yet, as she looked she felt her fear shift into determination. He had faced impossible odds, yet never wavered. She could not falter now. The plan was daring, would lead a small strike team into the heart of the enemy's forward base, would disable key weapons systems and communications. The rebels would create diversions along the forest perimeter. Speed, precision, and trust were their only weapons. Night fell and the operation began. Shadows moved like whispers through the ruins at the front close beside her. They navigated the ruined streets of the Crystal City with stealth and focus, their senses alert to every movement. Suddenly a patrol appeared. Alien soldiers armed and alert, scanning the darkness. His device pulsed softly, sending a wave of energy that temporarily stunned the guards. Took the lead, striking with precise force, disabling weapons, and guiding the team silently past danger. They reached the heart of the enemy base. Supply depots, weapons caches, communication hubs, all in reach. Hands trembled as she placed explosive charges, her mind racing with calculations. Every second counted. Every movement could save lives or end them. Then came the alarm. One of the sentries had regained consciousness. Red lights flashed and the sound of sirens filled the air. His heart sank. The enemy was aware. They were outnumbered and escape would be nearly impossible. Grabbed her arm. "We can still do this. Trust me. We get out together." Nodded. Together they fought through waves of soldiers, their movements a dance of precision and courage. The rebels' diversions worked perfectly. Explosions and smoke drew the enemy's focus, giving a chance to reach the exit. Just as they neared freedom, a massive shadow fell across them. The enemy commander, towering, jagged, unstoppable, stood in their path. His eyes glowed with fury. Froze for the briefest moment, fear clawing at her chest. "Go," shouted. "I'll hold him off." "No," yelled. "I won't leave you." But shook his head. "You can't fight him and escape together. You have to survive. Our people need you. I'll be fine." Time seemed to stretch. Chest ached, torn between fear and loyalty, between survival and the instinct to protect. Then she saw it, the courage that had drawn her to him in the first place, the same courage that had saved her countless times. "I trust you," she whispered, and ran, knowing that the next moments would decide everything. Behind her, explosions and the clash of weapons erupted, and the commander battled, a blur of light, energy, and sound. Didn't look back. She focused on leading the team to safety, guiding rebels through the mist and shadows. Hours later, they reached a hidden canyon far from the enemy. Exhausted, burned, but alive. Sank to her knees, shaking. The reality hit, had stayed behind, risking everything so she could live, so their plan could succeed. Tears blurred her vision. She had lost so much already, her city, her guards, her peace of mind. Yet here in the quiet canyon, she felt something stronger than grief. Gratitude, admiration, and an unbreakable bond. The rebels gathered around her. "You did it," the leader said softly. "You struck the heart of the enemy, and you survived." Shook her head, thinking of, "He's still out there," she whispered. "He didn't come with us." The camp grew tense. Every second mattered, but knew something vital. She had seen humans, one human in particular, achieve the impossible. Courage could defy logic. Hope could ignite the darkest night, and bonds formed in battle were stronger than any weapon. As dawn approached, she looked to the sky, imagining still fighting, still standing, still human in a world of monsters. And she swore silently, fiercely. She would not rest, she would not surrender until they were both safe, until her people were free, until the invaders were driven from their world. For the first time, Princess understood fully. Survival was not enough. Victory required courage, sacrifice, and trust, and she had found all three in a human student who had changed her fate forever. The sun had not yet risen when Princess led the rebels toward the heart of the enemy's stronghold. Her silver hair flowed behind her, her eyes sharp and determined. The city beyond the cliffs was still under the enemy's control, but this time she would not act defensively. This time she would strike to end the threat and rescue the one who had risked everything for her. His absence weighed heavily on her. She replayed the moment he had stayed behind, facing the enemy commander alone. Fear and anger twisted inside her, but beneath it, a deep resolve burned. She would not lose him. The rebels followed silently, trusting her leadership. Every step was measured, every shadow watched. They reached the edge of the enemy fortress, a jagged structure bristling with weapons and patrolling soldiers, glanced at her team. "We move fast, we strike hard, and we get back." The first wave of guards fell quickly, and the rebels moved like shadows, avoiding patrols and disabling defenses. Then, in the center of the stronghold, they found him. Was cornered by the commander, energy crackling around him. He fought valiantly, but fatigue was written on every line of his body. He shouted when he saw her, a mix of relief and disbelief lighting his face. "You came." "Of course I came," she said, her voice fierce. "I promised." The commander turned, eyes burning with fury. "You think you can change fate?" he hissed. "You are nothing but a child playing with forces you cannot control." Stepped forward, her hand gripping a glowing blade the rebels had provided. "I am not a child," she said steadily. "And courage is stronger than your fear, stronger than your weapons. Today we decide fate." Activated his device, sending a pulse that disrupted the commander's energy shields. Charged, moving with precision, striking with speed and power. Together, human ingenuity and alien skill created a force the enemy had never anticipated. The battle was fierce. Sparks flew, energy beams collided, and the ground shook with explosions. Yet through it all and fought side by side, their movements synchronized, their trust unshakable. Finally, with a combined effort, the commander fell. Blade pierced the energy core in his weapon, and the massive energy pulse that had threatened destruction dissipated. Silence fell, broken only by the gasps of rebels and the hum of disabled machines. Rushed to his side, he was bruised, exhausted, but alive. She held him tightly, relief and emotion overwhelming her. I thought I lost you," she whispered, tears streaking her face. "You didn't," he said, smiling weakly. "You came for me, just like I promised I'd come for your people." Around them, the rebels cheered. The enemy forces, leaderless and demoralized, began to retreat. Watched as the invaders fled, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe they had truly won. Days later, the Crystal City was being rebuilt. Fires were extinguished, and survivors emerged from hiding. Stood on the palace balcony, looking at the sunrise over her city. She felt no fear, no despair, only hope, courage, and an unshakable sense of purpose. Stood beside her, a hand brushing hers. "You've done it," he said softly. "Your people are safe." Smiled a quiet, radiant smile. "No," she said, "we did it together." She realized then that her life had changed forever. She had faced impossible odds, stood on the brink of surrender, and yet survived. Not by power alone, but by trust, courage, and the unexpected heroism of a human student. Looked at her, eyes filled with admiration. "What now?" he asked. "Now," she replied, "we rebuild, we protect our people, and we make sure that never again will anyone believe courage can be defeated by fear." He nodded, smiling. "Then let's do it together." For the first time in her life, Princess felt free, not free from duty, but free in her courage. She had discovered that hope could come from unexpected places, that humans could inspire, and that together, even the smallest spark could ignite a revolution. As the sun rose fully over the Crystal City and stood side by side, the city was safe, the enemy defeated, and their bond unbreakable. They had faced the impossible and won, together. And in that moment, nothing seemed impossible anymore.